Good evening, and thanks for joining tonight's TI Technology webinar hosted by Texas Instruments, where tonight we're going to do a little coding. My name is Mike Houston, and I'm the moderator for this event. I teach algebra and calculus near Pittsburgh, where I use TI technology to make tough-to-teach, tough-to-learn concepts accessible to all my students. And we're lucky to be joined by our two panelists, Jessica Cahoot and Stacy Thibodeau. Jessica earned a Bachelor's of Science in General Biology from the College of Computer, Mathematical, and Natural Sciences at the University of Maryland, College Park, and a Master's of Arts in Teaching in Secondary Education from Goucher College. She was a biology teacher at Reservoir High School for the past 17 years, but recently transitioned to informal education. Currently, Jessica is a climate change educator at the Howard County Conservancy. In or out of the classroom, Jessica believes that teaching students STEM skills along with advocacy are the ways to improve the future for all. So Jessica, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, it's great being here.
And Stacy holds Bachelor's of Science in Biology and Chemistry and a Master's degree in Educational Leadership from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. She has been in the science classroom for 21 years and currently teaches at Southside High School in Youngsville, Louisiana, where she teaches robotics, chemistry 1 and 2. She has also taught biomedical science courses in Project Lead the Way program and Chemistry 1 and 2 AP. She uses TI technology to assist her teaching, data collection, and modeling math concepts, linking them to science content. Stacy, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Mike.
At this point, Jess is going to discuss our agenda.
Sure. Well, today we are going to introduce you to some of the STEM camps resources that are free to all of you. And we're also going to let you know how you can borrow equipment. So if you like what you see and you're interested in starting your own STEM camp and you might need some help with supplies, we can help you out. And then you also have a chance for a webinar drawing at the end where you can win some fun stuff too. So stick around.
Thanks, Jess. And Stacy is going to discuss our expected outcomes.
So tonight we hope you leave with some ideas of how you can either add STEM projects into your classroom, or if you have extra time after state tests or for a club or camp. We're going to show you how to program on the CX2 and the 84 CE for different coding projects. And we're also going to explore different menus.
Perfect. Tonight we're expecting a large crowd, so your audio is muted. Feel free to send any questions to Stacy or Jessica using the Q&A window on the right side of your screen. We'll also be using the chat window tonight to send general messages. As a reminder, the session is being recorded, and we'll provide a link to the certificate of attendance at the conclusion of the webinar. So without further ado, Stacy, you have control. Feel free to share your screen.
Thanks, Mike. So welcome. Thank you for sharing your Tuesday night with us, or if you are watching this on demand, thank you. I actually got started with TI technology, watching lots of on-demand webinars. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. Jess and I both, you can probably hear the excitement in our voices tonight. We both have a passion for STEM and what it can do for kids and what we've seen it, how kids blossom with it. So we did provide our contact information if you want to reach out to us. Either one of us are more than happy to share ideas. I met Jessica at a conference. Every time we do this, Jess, we're like, when did we meet? Several years ago, doing just what we're doing tonight, introducing STEM projects, introducing STEM concepts, learning how to code, and then now we do this together. We share project ideas, we present together at national conferences. So there's my email as well as Jessica's. We're both very active on Twitter. If you like to follow people on Twitter and see what they're doing in their classrooms, or Jess now in her program that she runs, just again, sometimes to spark ideas and then to share ideas back. So why Yeah.
Go
Why
ahead.
do STEM by code, Jess? Why do you think that's a good idea?
Well, STEM is a really important skill for a lot of students to have. I think there is some misconceptions around STEM. A lot of students may not have been exposed to STEM concepts, and these types of projects are very entry level. So students that have maybe never thought about engineering or coding before, these projects that we're going to be introducing you today will really help them get started, because a lot of the jobs out there in the future, we don't really know what those are going to be about. But the ones that are in demand and the ones that students can make a lot of money off of are in the STEM field. So giving them that exposure to expanding their interests and understanding can be helpful for their future. But in the meantime, currently in the classroom, getting your students to do STEM, getting them to collaborate, in a lot of the STEM projects I've done, the collaboration is intense. Students really open up and begin talking to one another. And right now, that is such a big thing, getting students to communicate and talk. And they're able to develop those skills through these types of projects, to troubleshoot, to problem solve, to critically think, and to come up with creative problem solving. And everything here is set up for you. So even if you personally don't have any experience with coding, you're set up for success with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Jess and I met at a conference, and we both sat down at the table, and we were like, "What are we doing?" She's a biology teacher by trade. I'm still in the classroom, chemistry teacher, and we were like trying to figure this out. So like, maybe that's you. How do I even get started, Stacey and Jessica? Like, I'm not a coder. I'm a science teacher. I'm a math teacher. You know, I have this after school club I want to do. I had a call with Jess and some other friends the other day, and I want to plan a camp this summer. And I was like, hey, these are things I want to do. Help me out. So where do you get started, right? Chemistry teacher, biology teacher, and neither one of us are coders. So the best part is that TI has actually made it so that you can try on your own or walk through this with your students. So they have what is called TI codes in 10 minutes of code. This started way back when Hour of Code came out, and we were trying to get more coding into the classrooms, and TI came out with TI Basic, and then 2 years ago now, Python, where Python is, both of them are menu-driven. Students don't have to know the programming language. They're all on the handheld calculators that they're using in their math or science classrooms. And it walks you through how to actually you learn and or students learn. So I'm going to nerd out for a minute. Jess and myself and some other friends, that's what we did this summer. We actually had our own little PLC where we tried to learn Python. We sat with the 10 minutes of code and went through each unit and would check in with each other. So the way it's broken up is just Python with the handheld. And so it breaks it up into individual units, and all of the units are completely downloadable with student documents and teacher documents. So how do you get started? What are in and output? If and while statements, different modules. We're going to show you some specific examples tonight. The microbit, and then some different projects you could possibly do. And then for us in our STEM classroom, I want to add things like a microcontroller. We're going to show you that tonight. It's called the Innovator Hub. And so there's also units for Innovator Hub. And so like I mentioned, Jess and I, we did this past summer. And so why would you do this is all those things Jess mentioned, but it can also spark interest. Maybe your students, you have this club after school and they want more, or you want to just start some kind of program, maybe a summer program. It works on multiple platforms depending on what you have either at your school, or Jess and I are going to show you how you can borrow technology. It works on the TI-Nspire CX2 and the TI-84CE, both in Python. It works on the TI-Nspire CX and the TI-84CE in BASIC. Jess and I both use Python. That's kind of where we're headed with our students that we're working in. Jess, you wanted to add anything into that?
Yeah, I found like that's how I learned how to decode was through the 10 minutes to code. And I love that it's available on all of their platforms and all of their languages. So whatever you're looking for, it's available. And Python, I feel, is such a ubiquitous language that kids having those skills and being introduced to Python, I think it can open doors for them and lead them to even more maybe interest in taking more computer science classes later on.
Absolutely. So I mentioned that I had, or Mike mentioned, and then it was in the description, I teach a robotics class. And I'm not a typical robotics teacher that uses like a competition. I actually created the robotics class as my playground for TI technology. And so I started last school year, and I started with the 10 minutes of code. I was doing only TI Basic last school year, and a lot of these projects have evolved in my classroom. And Jess has done some with her students, as well as different workshops with teachers and other organizations. So we just want to share with you guys, like, maybe this is something that you're interested in doing. Maybe you have some people in your school district, but kind of first, how do you get started? Obviously, we would want you to do 10 minutes of code. It gives you the basics, it gives you the foundation, kind of gives you that idea of what programming language is, what are some steps, what's some logic. Digital Mood Ring was probably my first project that I did with students. And the cool part about it is TI has lots and lots of resources for you. So there are currently resources for CX2 in Python, and then resources for the 84CE and Nspire CX in TI Basic. So we just want to kind of show you a few things. Everything is hyperlinked in the document. You'll get a copy of it. Like Mike mentioned, you'll get an email about the recording. So everything is in there. So it just took me straight to the education.ti page specifically for Mood Ring. They've done a lot of work with it, thinking in terms of, okay, so I have to teach X content. Where can I pull this STEM project? I need to work with students on these topics. Where can I pull in this STEM project? How can I show my district supervisor, my school-based administrator, that I'm still covering the math science standards? So again, it walks you through all of the requirements. What do you need for the project? So the digital mood ring, I'm from an older era where we actually had mood rings, and I think they're kind of coming back. So the mood ring is, it's a stone that sits on your finger, and then it turns colors based on your mood, right? So we don't have a stone, but we have a temperature sensor. And so we're going to use input values from the temperature sensor and the microcontroller, like I mentioned, called the TI Innovator Hub, to then create light based on values the user decides.
And I find like the mood ring project is a really great first step in any sort of STEM project. It really only uses one sensor. It really hits that input output. It really introduces the menu. So if you didn't have a chance to do 10 minutes of code, it's a really great introductory project. And if you go up a little bit higher on the website, it breaks it down by topic in terms of you can decide to do how many hours. Like you can do a short version, a medium version, a long version. There you go. Yeah, so depending on what you want to do, if you want to have just like a class period, if you're doing it with your students during the school year, or if you're working on just one day and you only have it for a camp and you only have an hour, there's a version for that. There's also a longer version, a 4-hour or even a 6-hour version. So there's step-by-step process for all of this, and each one of those have accompanying videos for every step here. There were also some questions in the chat that I wanted to address before moving on. Someone was mentioning about the TI-84CE. So there's two versions of that calculator now. So there's a Python edition that will allow you to code in Python. But if you don't have the Python edition, you won't be able to access the Python language on just the regular CE. But if you have the SmartView software, their latest update for that will have the Python capability. So if it's not on your calculator as a teacher, you could project it through the software.
Yeah, so like we wanted to show you all the different resources. Jess and I don't know, what you have in your classroom and or maybe what you're comfortable working with. So those are the Python resources. There's basic resources, and then for both the 84 and the CX. So just kind of some, like Jess was mentioning, like a 1 hour, a 4 hour, maybe a 6 hour. So basically what it does, it takes the Innovator Hub, which is TI's microcontroller. The microcontroller it's really cool. I don't recommend it, but I've had students drop it. Nothing's breaking. It's in a plastic house. There's in ports on one side. There's out ports on one side. There is a speaker-ish, a way to make sound that comes out the back or the underside, that we'll talk about tonight. There's a brightness sensor. There's ports on the side to add extra components, like the TI rover. We're going to show you some video tonight. There's other projects called Path to STEM where you can add an external breadboard and they can be creative and design circuits. So it's very, very versatile depending on what you're doing. And then the document itself, you can download it. I showed you the resources. You download the document, it becomes yours as a teacher, right? So as a teacher, I can maybe only want to do 1 through 5 today for the camp, and then I want them to do something else. Maybe they're going to do, some physics with color. At the same time, it's my document. I can edit it, I can modify it, and it didn't mess up TI's document. There's challenges within the document. I'm going to show you a picture or the actual document. So there's challenges to give the student some ownership at the same time, where it's not just, okay, go do this, spit back this, kind of back and forth. And so this is what it looks like on an editor page in Python on the CX2. Anyway, and then there's some videos. How cool is that, right? So like we are always teaching, we're always learning how to teach different things. It actually has videos on how the mood ring works, how the actual handheld works, and then all of the different challenges. This is new. When we first started with all this, we didn't have all that. But now that we have it, it's like foolproof, right? So I want to have this club or camp or after AP test, I want to do a project with students. Digital mood ring would be probably my first one to go to, right, Jess?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to show you real quick how this looks. So I downloaded the document. It's now housed on my computer. It's already set up. I can edit it if I wanted. I can modify, that kind of thing. So this is like one of the challenges that I mentioned. So it explains to the students and or the teacher. The color LED is controlled by a statement. It's called color.rgb that sets the color, a red value, a green value, a blue value. Each value is from 0 to 255, where 0, and I tell my students, no electricity is being sent, or 255, it's all, right? So students are thinking, oh, can I blend them? We'll talk about that. So a bright light would be 255, where a dim would be less than. So just really kind of an introduction to color. And so it's already set up for you. This is the editor page, like I mentioned.
And this is the student document too. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I appreciate it. The way Python works is you have to import the modules into the operating system on the document when you need it, right? So normally we think of Python as a huge programming language. You need a computer with all of its working memory. The way the wonderful people in the engineering department at TI, they came up with modules, and each module is set up for the commands and lines of code that you need based on the project or the activity that you're doing. So we had to import the TI hub, and it will give you all the commands. If you notice, these are grayed out. They're grayed out or with a pound sign. That means they're commented out, and it's not an executable line of code, but it does give the user an idea of what they need to do. So if I were doing this with my students, I would have the cursor there, and I'm like, okay, let's learn how to turn the red light on. Go with me? So everything is menu-driven in coding, both on BASIC and in Python. So I'm going to come over here and press menu. And as the teacher, I can see my screen, but the students can see the buttons that I'm pushing and the commands that pop up when I do it, so they can follow along. So after I press menu, I'm going to come to TI Hub. I already imported the Hub module, and these are all of the commands that are in the Hub module. I mentioned that on the Hub itself, there are in and out ports. There's a brightness sensor, and then there's the sound output. There's also a red light, and then there is the color RGB LED. So we call those built-ins. So let's go look at a built-in. So it's a color, a light, a sound, or a brightness. We're going to go ahead and look at color, and ta-da, RGB, green, red, green, blue. And that's exactly what page 1.2 showed us. I know it kind of moved real fast, but it told us the value was between 0 and 255, just in case the students don't remember it. So I'm going to say I need 255. So if I only want it to be a red light, how much should I put for green?
And it gives you that prompt again in case you forget from 0 to 255.
Right. And then see, it comes back up again. So if I were to run this, I should only see, it's gonna not be beautiful, but I apologize, not beautiful. Yeah, okay. It would show only the red light on. And so then you could have the students, okay, now I want a dim light. They wouldn't put the whole 255 value, they would only put like half or 125 or something like that. So that comes with the actual document. Jeff mentioned there's a student document and a teacher document. So you wanted to do this with your students, go through the teacher document, walk through it. Everything is there for you. This is the page that would run the actual program. And then I have another activity. I like this one a lot. My students actually liked it a lot. So it uses the function of grabbing, and then I can see, oh, well, what's a blended color? So if red is 0 to 255 and green is 0 to 255 and blue is 0 to 255, what if I blend them? What colors can I get? And so it gives students an idea of how to make other colors for their digital mood ring.
Yeah, I love how this breaks it down step by step. And so as Stacy had mentioned, all of this is editable. So if you only want to do certain parts of it, you want to take things out because you only have a certain amount of time, you can. And so we're showing here the student facing document that you could potentially send your students. So it has those notes for them to be prompted on how to design their code. Whereas the teacher document, you're starting this from scratch and you're like, I don't even know where to begin. It's already loaded for you. So you can kind of see how the code is shaped to help your students to facilitate how to figure this all out with them.
All right, Sounds of Music. So Sounds of Music is another project that only basically requires the hub. Digital mood ring, you don't have to have the temperature sensor. That's like the part 2 based on temperature input. They could produce the color. They could just have the hub and do the part 1 with just colors. So it's very well thought out. I did this in the fall with my students because Jess and I had another webinar on the same project, and my students fell in love with it. If you have students at all that are interested in music and they're in band or chorus that can read music, this is the activity for them. It not only teaches them how to code sound output with frequency and time, but also tune or the tone they want. But the activity itself walks them through hearing. How does the ear work? It walks them through how a microphone works to amplify sound. It walks them through what is a violin line of, or code of music. What does a piano look like? The E, D, G, F scales of music. I mean, I learned so much from my students. And then I even had some students bring their sheet music. I had one student who plays the guitar. And so he brought his sheet music and he was like, I need to do this on the hub.
Yeah, it's amazing what students can do with just giving them the format of how the notes are arranged with the frequencies in the code. And my favorite thing about this activity is the science of hearing and seeing the connection between understanding the biology and the physics of sound and how that is important and how that plays out in the code. And yes, this also gives that opportunity for those more artistic students, the musically inclined students, to really feel successful. And as someone who is not always so musically inclined or who can't really carry a tune, it was really interesting too to learn a little bit more about music and learning about reading music and how that also correlates with frequencies.
So the beginning of this activity, again, it's a totally different module. This was something that the guys at the STEM team put together. So it's a different import. Notice they have some prompts again, right? These are commented out statements and it's telling you what you need to do. So this is already set up. It's a name that tune. I'm not going to play it for you. The sound wasn't great a while ago, but it walks the students through 3 different tunes that are played, and then the students have to guess it. And then now you kind of hook them. Now you kind of have their attention, and then it introduces them to the violin and tone, which is frequency and time. Once my students learn how to do the sound, they want to add it to every project. I don't know about you, Jess. They want to do the RGB LED, and they also want to do sound on every single project, whether it's part of the project or not.
Right. Everything lights up and everything makes a noise. So imagine like 30 kids doing this all at once. It's amazing.
So there's the violin. This one is making a boop sound. Again, just right, depending on what you need to do, how much time you have, all of that depends on, you as a teacher get to decide. But then you can go in depth on other things. Like I mentioned, it talks about a speaker. There's a project under the Path to STEM called, it's the first project where we actually make a speaker. We use an external breadboard. We use a very, very strong magnet, a nail, some copper wire, a styrofoam cup, and make our own speaker. And so we take what we learned in this activity and go build our own speaker. And so the nail vibrates with the magnet and the wire, the electromagnetic signal that's coming through, and then they hear the same, but it's amplified because it's in a styrofoam cup. It was such a cool project.
Well, and that's a great thing about a lot of these STEM projects is that once you kind of go through them and you have a better understanding of how the code works and you get a little bit more confident with your skills, you start coming up with ideas for other things. And a lot of these projects have sparked additional things that Stacy and I have worked on. Just a lot of creativity outside of these STEM projects, because it just gives you a really good foundation. It gives you a lot of support so that once you feel a little bit more confident, you're able to say, well, what if we tried this? And I mean, that's what you want your students to do anyway, right? Be creative.
And then if the students say, what if I do that? I'm like, I don't know, let's try it. I really don't know. I've heard that before.
And that's how I learned a lot of the stuff starting out too. They're like, well, how do I do this? I'm like, I don't know, let's find out. And so a lot of it, we were just learning together. And just with the sounds of music along with the mood ring, the website has a really great setup with, again, timing, the quick version, the coding version, and the full-blown STEM version. And each one has videos breaking down each step. So it has everything that you possibly could need getting started, and coming up with ideas of what exactly you want to do in your classroom and how you want to get started, and kind of piecing it together to meet your own specific needs, which is always helpful.
Always, always helpful. Do we need to look at the chat? I see it's popping up on my
Yeah,
screen.
so it says, can you give an example of a leading question for students in the music coding? So I think there's a lot of them, because there's a lot of different topics within the coding for music, right? Because like you get into the science of hearing, so there's probably something for that. Looking
So
at
in the activity, it gives you the diagram of an ear, right? And so how do we hear is basically the same way that a speaker will amplify, right? So some sound wave, whatever that wave is hitting the eardrum, and then those bones then amplify the sound, right? And then it sends it to the nerve, the signal. So the speaker would work the same. And so you could have a conversation, even like that, if you were in a science classroom. What's the phenomenon of how an ear works versus a speaker or a drum, you know?
Right. Or connecting, how is the structure of an ear comparable to a speaker in processing sound? And then looking at, understanding frequencies in relation to the codes and creating the code to create the notes. Oh, but how does that relate to coding? So what you're looking for is the frequencies. So the frequencies is what you're hearing. So you can look at how that air, how the air shifts in order to hear, or how that speaker shifts the air in order to make those frequencies. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use those frequencies to determine those notes, and those notes come together to make music. So you're looking at frequency versus time in order to see how that as those frequency patterns change, how does that sound change? How do those notes change? And that's going to be the difference in what you're hearing as that frequency increases or decreases, and how you're interpreting that information in your brain.
And then the activity actually teaches the students about, so start with one frequency. In this case, this is what an A4 frequency is. And what do you do with a quarter note at 100 beats per minute? And they learn about beats, half note, whole note, quarter note, half note. And then they learn about the coding aspect of it as well. So it really walks them through the whole gamut of not just that it's some tone that plays that's a high pitch or a low pitch, but it responds to a wave with the frequency. If you wanted to teach, what frequency is in a sound wave, and then how does that then transfer to notes? This activity is definitely user-friendly for that. So I saw Tamara's question. You can always have the students build from code from scratch. Okay. You as the teacher, once you figure it out or have the students figure it out, absolutely they can do it from scratch. This is an activity that's kind of, here you go. You want to do a sound activity. You want to do something that teaches the students about music. Try this, and then you can definitely modify that for your students, Tamara. With my students, I don't do this entire activity because I teach a full year course. I can spend 3 weeks on this activity, and I teach them what sound is, what the output, what tone, what frequency, then with notes. And then I had them for 2 days. It was probably almost 3 days, coding music, actual music. They brought in sheet music or it just happened to be around the holiday season, and I put up Jingle Bells, and then they had to do it. So that was their way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Before this activity came out, and I had a student who was in AP Music Theory, and we were just playing around with the hubs after the AP Biology exam, and we were just like playing with the tones and frequencies. And she's like, I really want to code some music. She's has some chamber choir music for an audition. And she's like, could I code this music in the hub? And I was like, well, probably. I just don't know how to do it yet. And so I found a program that someone else written that was like the Harry Potter theme song or something. And I sent her the code. She kind of looked at it, figured out how the notes worked within the code, and then just redid it into her chamber music audition sheet music. And I was like, wow. Like there was really super advanced kids, like they run with it. Like you just introduce them to how it's done, and they just take it beyond your expectations. So if you even feel like if you're the type of teacher out there that you're like, I don't know how to do this myself, these STEM projects give you the personal foundation to help support your students, but your students will probably do a lot more with it.
Yeah, my guitar, it taught me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so again, we kind of talked about all these, but the videos are linked to, or the web page with the videos, different challenges, that kind of thing. All right, brightness sensor. Okay, so Jess and I showed you two kind of not necessarily canned. I don't want you to think of them as canned, but maybe you're like, I don't know where to start, Stacy and Jeff. I have no experience. How do I do this with any kids? The first two activities we did, those are highly recommended. I would do those with the students, okay? Then once you kind of figure out, okay, so we understand that there's input, there's output. So the input from the digital mood ring was a temperature sensor. The output was color. There was no input per se as a sensor, but we asked the user what were some inputs for the coding sound of music. And then the output was the sound. So what if we had a sensor that was input that's built in? And that's where the brightness sensor comes in. I'm going to show you.
And what we're about to show you, so if you only have the hub, you don't have any of the other sensors, but again, we can show you how to get those sensors or borrow those sensors from the STEM team. But if you just want to play with the hub itself, the brightness sensor is built in, the LED, the speakers are built in, so you don't need any of the extra stuff. And it's a really simple way to show the capabilities and just play with the students to get them curious of what they could do. And so the built-in brightness sensor will read the amount of light around there, and you can do a lot of things with just reading the amount of light. And the 10 minutes of code will walk you through using it. And Stacy's going to show you an example of what you can do with it.
So I'm going to show you how to code with the brightness sensor. So I mentioned my document camera wasn't working, sorry. So here's the hub, right? So I mentioned that there were in ports, and so that's where I have my temperature sensor plugged in. There's out ports, like if I wanted a motor, I wanted some external LEDs. The sound output is on the bottom, all right? And then on the, if it's facing you on the that side, bottom side, there's the brightness sensor, and then this would be where you plugged in the handheld. Or a while ago, I had my computer. Rover, we're going to show you. That's where you plug in the rover. And then I look up at the top side. This is where I can plug in other LEDs or extra cables for the breadboard. And then if I were running things that required more power than the handheld could supply, I could add an external power. So I wanted to make sure I showed you guys those. And somebody was asking questions about the 84 plus Python CE. I heard of somebody asking that question, Jess, and so
Yes.
it needs to say Python on there in order for you to be able to run the Python program. Okay, so we've been talking a lot, right? And so like, how do you program? How do you code? I'm going to show you on the Nspire first. So this is what a blank document on the Nspire looks like. If I want to create a new program or a new page, I'm just going to insert a new one. And I want to add a Python. Math science people, you guys are here. You obviously know a lot of the functions of the others. So I'm just going to go add Python, and I'm just going to call it Bright. Now on the Nspire, you can actually say the type of program you want. And so when I tell my students when we're working with Hub or Rover, go ahead and say the type of program, because what happens is it automatically imports all that modular stuff I was talking about, right? So a while ago, we saw that the Hub module was in there. If I assign it to a Hub project and say, okay, all of the modules that I could possibly need or use for the Hub are there. Other imports are there as well, but those are the ones that we could possibly use.
Right. You may not need them for depending on what we're particularly doing, but it's better to have them than not to have them. Because if your program's not running correctly in Python, it might be because it's missing this library.
Correct. So the way Python works with getting data or sending, usually getting, you have to store it as a variable first. And so one thing that I do in my classroom, it might not work for you, is I create running lists behind my board, and I'm pointing behind me because it's behind me, of all of the commands that we've learned throughout the year. I have 4 pages worth. Now, this is a full year course, right? The 4 pages worth of all of the commands we've learned. So I tell them, what do? We start a new program. What kind of project is it? It's a Hub project, so we import it. What's the first thing we need to do? Set up a variable. Like it's become routine. So because I'm using the brightness sensor as an input, I have to set it up as a variable. So I'm going to just type in B. And on the teacher software, it's so nice because you can use your actual keyboard of it. And I'm going to type in equals, and I'm going to go get what B is going to be equal to. So B is going to be equal to my brightness measurement. So it is an input that's automatically in the Hub. It's a built-in. So a while ago, I kind of showed you menu for the color. It's the same place, menu, Hub. It's still a built-in, but this one is the brightness input. Now, if I needed to range it, I want the values to be within a certain range because I need to use those values for another function. I don't need that today. I just want to get that measurement. That's the only line of code I need. Students will then understand, oh, it's a sensor input. I need a measurement. All right. And again, this is just a basic, real quick, how to use it. All I care about is what is that measurement. So I want to do what's called print. So a print statement prints whatever variable you want, or I can have something in quotes, like a string that would say what I want it to be. I'm just going to print B. Okay. So I kind of mentioned a while ago, this is the editor page of Python. And when I run it, it's in a shell page. So I'm going to use a shortcut, even though my friends know me that I don't like shortcuts.
Control
I'm
R,
not.
Control
I'm going to
R.
go. I know. I'm going to go menu. It is under number 2 for run, and it is
Control
number 1
R.
to Control R.
And
So that's
and
the
since you,
brightness.
go ahead, finish up.
I'm sitting in my room at this time. It's measured in lumens, and so like if students take their cell phones and turn the flashlight on, they get a much brighter value. So how can you use this, right? Like, so why would I even mention this?
Well, and if you go back to your program really quickly,
Oh
or
yeah,
if it's
sure.
too difficult to do
No,
that,
that's good.
something to notice about that value too is that it's a moment in time. And so when you ran the program, it was just the brightness when you hit run. And so you can learn, or you can teach your students how to do other things like loops and put a while loop in there in order to capture that brightness data over a longer period of time. But
Yeah.
this was just showing you that capability of just taking that snapshot. And you can even do a beginning program like this with your students. Say, well, what does this mean? You know, what if I put the flashlight on it now? How do you expect it to change? And getting them to think about what that syntax actually means and what the code they're writing is actually doing.
Right. And like, what's robotics? Like, why do we have a course, or why do we have competitions? Because it's all about automation, right? And so robots make our lives easier. So I don't want to have to keep compressing Control R. So I put it in a loop, and then a loop runs it for me, and it will record the value of however long I want it to run for. Good point, Jess. Thanks.
And then speaking of robotics.
I know. So these are just some projects my kids put together. We use the brightness sensor. You can see their finger right here. It turns a green LED, and then they had an external servo motor, that turned and then dispensed beams. It's an automatic dispenser. Like, literally, that was it. And they love to put sound.
This is an example of one of those projects that is like extra, like those creative ideas beyond these STEM projects. What could you do with your students to make them the idea makers? And it's just, they're so creative. And then, of course, the rover. And so with the rover, you're really getting into robotics because you're getting this little car to move. And just like all the other projects we've talked about before, the 10 Minutes of Code rover has supplementary materials for that with Python and CE, as well as basic with the Nspire, that walks you through how to do a lot of different things with the rover. And it's super simple to use. The first time I ever brought a rover home, I had a 4th grader at home, my son. I showed him just where the menu was, and within 10 minutes of touching it, he was able to program it to go around our kitchen island. So it's really entry level for all students, and it really gets them excited about being able to code, and whether it's just simple shapes, like a polygon activity like Stacy has here. So they're making just several different squares.
Yep. This kid actually went above and beyond and tried to make a cube. So then he programmed it to make all of that's my guitar kid. He goes above and beyond for everything.
Well, and that's the thing, like, as Tamara was saying, that you have these advanced students, like it's the low floor, high ceiling type of activities where you just introduce them to the basics and they run with it.
Yep.
It's
great. So with Rover, not only is it just drawing shapes, so there's a spot on Rover where I just had some little tiny skinny expo markers, and I had like the big Post-it note papers. Some people do like shower boards, like dry erase, that kind of stuff, just to draw shapes. Again, lots of other projects, making complex shapes. They have to learn inside angles versus outside angles and the distance for each. There's some physics activities. My favorite as a science teacher is that Rover actually has 2 sensors on it. It has a range sensor on the front. It's like 2 little eyeballs that you can use based on the sensor measurement. It stops, turns, whatever. So this is outside in the hall by my classroom. So they made sure that that it got too stuck. But this kid, love this kid. He used that there's an RGB sensor on the bottom of the rover, And based on the input values of that RGB sensor, it turned left, right, backwards, forwards, all that. He did that all by himself. All I showed them was that the sensor does this, and he did everything himself. It's amazing of what those kids want to accomplish when they're given the opportunity and the time to explore. It's not, here's some, one type of problem to do. This is what it can do. Now you go try.
Yeah, so if you have the opportunity to set up a camp or after exams, these projects are great for that, where it really gives an opportunity for students to be creative, work through problems, and really come up with things that are pretty amazing. And there's more. So it's not just the stuff that we've showed you today. There are several webinars on STEM projects, and I've linked them all here, and you'll have access to this presentation after the webinar, so you can watch past webinars all on similar topics. So if you're really trying to build up a STEM camp or just find activities for your own classroom, these are previous webinars that you can go back and watch and learn from. And Stacy and I are in some of them, and there's some other instructors in there as well.
And also that we spend more time in some of those on individual projects and actually doing all of the coding. Tonight was kind of a general survey, especially the Moody one. That's all about mood ring. So just more ideas to get you interested.
And then all the other projects. So there are a lot just on the website. The pet car alarm is a really great resource as well that deals with creating an alarm if a dog or a cat or an animal, it was left in a car, kind of like the Tesla's dog mode. It's great for middle school students or even high school students. It's just a really I find, like, if you go from digital mood ring to pet car alarm, they go really well together. And then into some of the other STEM projects, I have the soft spot in my heart for the smart irrigation system. That's where Stacy and I really bonded. And that's where it really clicked for me as a biology teacher, because at the time, when I went to this professional development to learn about the smart irrigation system, we were building a native plant garden at our school. And I was like, oh my gosh, we could use this smart irrigation model as an example, as a model for how we could water our own native plant garden sustainably. And it just clicked that I'm like, there is a space for coding in the content area. And I've been that way ever since. And also as a biology teacher, the Heart Project is another favorite of mine. After the AP biology exam, I had my AP students do this to talk about the anatomy of the heart, but it also really gets into some pretty extensive circuitry. So like they have to build an electronic circuit. They use the breadboard in the hub. So that part, connecting jumper wires, using Play-Doh to conduct the electricity through the heart, making LEDs light up to show not just the pumping of the blood through the heart, but also the electrical impulses through the heart. And so my AP Bio students ate that up. It was awesome. We talked about the making music with code. Some Like It Tepid is a great one using vernier temperature sensors with something called a sensor link. So if you have vernier sensors in your classroom, your science teachers might do or might have them that you can possibly borrow, but a sensor link allows those vernier sensors to talk to the hub, so you can do some authentic data collection and then use the code to process that information. Running the bases with the RGB array is another fun one. If anyone is in the AP computer science principles, there's some activities that align with that. And then it's some more rover activities. So there's a lot you can choose from. And that if you go through the website, there's something for every content area. There's something for every interest. I can't say enough about how these projects have supported me in my own STEM journey, and it's been nice to have just a lot of supplemental resources to get started so that I feel confident to try things on my own too. So if you're interested in trying some stuff.
I know, we mentioned that you can borrow supplies. So how did Jess and I get, obviously we did not have all of this in our classroom. We actually asked the STEM team and they shipped us stuff. Try it out with your class, try it out with your club. There's a Google form. They will help you get organized. If you don't know what technology to use, they'll send you a handheld and a kit to start out with. They'll send you links to videos. If that doesn't work, they'll make a Zoom call with you. These guys they're ready to get the STEM projects into your classroom. And just like Jess and I, they believe in the power of having the students learn the coding, but also that design component, that big E of STEM scares so many people. And these projects make it so that it's not as scary. Something that was just released, we got an email today, right, is the TI Codes contest. So this happened, I think it's been happening, I don't know, past four or 5 years for sure. And each year they have a different theme. You assemble a group from your school and you come up with a design challenge with the codes, with the types of materials. And this one is to do with fur, feathers, fins, or scales. This project relates to pets and animals. Last year was something to do with medical. Different years, there's different things. So check it out if that's something that interests you in working with students. So I think we are almost out of time, Jess. Mike's going to kill us. So thank you so much all for coming tonight. If you were watching on demand, again, Jess and I are more than happy to help anybody. If you want to get started, if you want to hear how we do it, just bounce ideas off of us. That's how we do it. I'll have an idea. Jess will have an idea. Just really, really here to help anybody who wants to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're here for you guys, and I can't say enough about the STEM team. Reach out to them too. They are super helpful, and they want to get you started. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. As promised, we are going to be giving away to one lucky winner tonight a TI graphing calculator of their choice. And tonight's lucky winner is Elva Lewis. So Elva, congratulations. We'll be in touch soon over email to get a little more information from you. But congrats on winning our TI graphing calculator for tonight. To receive a certificate of attendance, go ahead and click the link in the chat window. Also listed as a link for the documents from tonight. And if you're watching this on demand, go ahead and copy that link into your favorite browser to receive your certificate. And if the links aren't working for any reason, don't panic. You'll automatically get a follow-up email from us in a couple days. And that follow-up email will contain links to the certificate, the documents, and the recording as well, so you can watch this again at your own pace. When you leave the webinar tonight, a brief survey will automatically appear in your browser. Your feedback guides us as we plan future online events. So if you were thinking about something as Jess and Stacy were presenting tonight, and you're like, man, I really wish they would do something about a webinar on whatever, share your thoughts in that post-webinar survey. We'd love to hear from you. Great job, Stacy and Jessica. Thanks so much for all the info from tonight.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Dad, for being here.
I agree. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We hope to see you back online next week. Have a great night and stay safe.